evening, everybody. I'm just looking at the squares here. Okay. All right. So I have a couple of things for you tonight. First, I want to go through some slides to explain a little bit about what calligraphy is, and then what is the approach of looking at calligraphy from a meditative point of view. The idea of tonight's workshop is to be a little interactive, and I'm not sure how many of you have like your some brush and ink ready at hand. So, oh, there you go. I see some brush and ink coming up on the screen. Cool, because I would like to be able to see if we can write something together. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Oops. And share. There we go. There we go. Everybody see this, right? Okay. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay. All right. So the topic of today is Shodo, and Shodo is Japanese calligraphy. That's the name we'll explain in a minute. And it's how to look at meditative calligraphy as a way to find your inner spirit in a way, in the concept of how can we can use our body and our posture and our breath, and then with the activity of calligraphy to bring those things together. Okay. Okay, so couple of things that I would like to go over of what we're going to cover today is I'm going to explain really quickly what is Shodo, and from a traditional point of view, but also on the approach that I have from Shodo, and what are the merits of practicing calligraphy, because I think there are some real benefits from taking on this practice, and what are the advantages and what are the merits from practicing calligraphy, and also how to integrate calligraphy practice with the meditation component, because they could be one and the same. What the thing is, some people may have some sort of meditation practice already in their lives, and then they wanted to learn how can I use this as a meditative activity, or how can I kind of integrate the two of them. And if the concept that I speak about calligraphy can actually be applied to other practices as well. All right, so before I get going, I would like to introduce myself and give you a little bit of background where I come from and where what my background is. So my background, from my introduction to calligraphy, started from martial arts. So I practiced Aikido from a very young age. That's me here at age, I don't know, 15 or something like that. As a young teenager, I took up on the martial art practice, and one of my teachers, which is here picture, is the late Fumio Toyota Shihan, and he was based in Chicago. And I did go to his Aikido school in Chicago for one summer to mostly just train in Aikido, and just kind of like, it was kind of like a summer camp, so to speak. Then at the end of my training there, when I was ready to go, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so this was like a big trip for me to go from Puerto Rico to Chicago. He wrote a calligraphy for me. He wrote a piece and gave it to me as some sort of like token of completing this sort of summer camp. As a teenager, I looked at it and I was kind of like, oh, this is really cool. I knew that he was not in the habit of doing this a lot, and his calligraphies were far, he gave it to some people, and he was definitely known as someone who would like to do calligraphy, but he wasn't known as an artist, right? He was known as an Aikido master. So, but I said, I would like to learn how to do this. So I took it upon myself to buy a couple of supplies. I bought a brush, I bought some ink, and I took it with me. And this piece that I have here is the piece that I try to copy day after day. I wanted to just copy what he wrote without really not knowing anything about how Japanese calligraphy was taught or how do you actually even write anything. But I thought of myself as someone who could take somewhat artistic, I would say. So I was kind of like, I mean, if I put my head down to it, I can draw something fairly well, not naturally, but I can make the effort and it looks fairly good. So I was kind of like, I mean, I know how to draw, so I can do this. But it took years upon years to just trying to copy this without much success. And then eventually I realized that I kind of needed to learn what calligraphy was and what it entailed. And then I finally found somebody who I could take some classes with, and she kind of took me on her wing and showed me the ropes of like the basic strokes and all the things that I was missing for like 10 years of just doing this by myself. And once I did that, then it was a big difference on the quality of what I was able to write. But with my Aikido training also comes some training in Zen meditation, and now those three the three legs of the stool are trying to hold everything together. It was like a martial arts background and then some training in Zen and then calligraphy practice. I was like, all these three things have something in common. And I could, I've been working mostly my whole life to explain the best I can on how these things actually work together and how all these practices work together. So anyway, long story short, I started doing YouTube videos in the early 2010s. I think it was about 2012, 2013. I was really active on YouTube around 2014, 2015. So people started asking to if I could somehow teach this calligraphy thing. So I eventually created online courses where folks can learn the basics of calligraphy through online classes. And then right now, I'm running Gohitsu Shodo Kai, which is a calligraphy school, a Western calligraphy school. And we have an introductory course, and we also have ongoing classes that we run semester long online. So everything has sort of kind of like exploded and taken on a path where we have been able to reach many students worldwide. So, and I was very thankful for Miyako-san to invite me to do this workshop. So, all right, that's a quick background. So let's get into what is Shodo. Okay. Now, when we talked about Shodo, it's a way. It's the literal meaning is the way of writing. The word Shodo is composed of two characters. Sho means writing, and do, it means the way. And then that is the key on this practice, is by having the word or the character do as the way, it becomes a way of life. It becomes a path of training and a path of refinement and a path for one to work on our character and spirit. Okay, so taking on that specific path and giving it that meaning is really what makes the activity have depth. And in Japanese, and one of the things that it's talking about martial arts, a lot of Japanese arts have that do at the end. So for example, you have what I practice, Aikido, then you have Judo, then you have Kendo, then you have Karate do. So like all these arts have that do in it. And it's what that do, meaning the way of life, is what takes up on that depth, that this is just not a physical activity, right? There's something more meaningful behind it. So when we talk about calligraphy and meditation, okay, there's a couple of things that comes to mind. And I want to define what calligraphy is, and what art is, and then what meditation is, and then that's how all these things come together. So when we talk about calligraphy, we can define calligraphy as the art of writing letters or characters in this case, because kanji are not letters, so characters. So the art of writing letters or characters, and the purpose is not necessarily for the characters to be read, but to communicate a deeper meaning between the artist and the viewer. And then we can see that in Western calligraphy, right? When we do Western calligraphy, the shape of the letters sometimes is like, you have to be like, what does it say? And then when they tell, oh yeah, I can see the word. Like, it's very artistically written, because the idea is not to read it, because otherwise you just type it. If I want to read it, is to have the letters be a form of art, and through that form of art, going into what art is, it's a communication activity that stimulates emotion through the senses. Okay, so when someone encounters a piece of calligraphy, we want that person to be moved somehow. Okay, and then when we are writing calligraphy, we in our Zen training, we call this kiai. Kiai means like your energetic power, right, or your vitality. Okay, and then that kiai needs to be transmitted to the paper so that the person who encounters that calligraphy can actually be moved by it, and have some feeling of what the artist was trying to communicate. And sometimes the artist was communicating this consciously, and sometimes it was unconsciously. So sometimes you look at calligraphy that can have a sense of playfulness or anger or power or sadness or delicate or rough. Okay, so all those things are imprinted in that paper, and it can be felt throughout multiple centuries, because we can look back at all masters and still see what that imprint was, even if it's like, hundreds or thousands of years ago. So when we talked about meditation or Zen in this case, what we talk about is the power of concentration, and that's what we can achieve when we sit down to write calligraphy. And then the Sanskrit word that we use in Zen is called samadhi, and samadhi is that state of meditative absorption, when I am so focused in an activity that separation between me and the activity starts to blur. Okay, and then you can, when you're in that state of full concentration, then you can find relaxation and clarity, and then we can achieve that through the activity of writing characters. The classical way for meditation would be to sit on a cushion, cross your leg, and then focus on your breath, and that's one way. But with calligraphy, we can use that activity or form of activity to achieve the same goal. So when we talk about what meditative calligraphy or Zen calligraphy is, the activity of communicating, like I was explaining, but this time is communicating in that state of samadhi when you're using your brush, your ink, and a paper. Okay, those very, very simple tools that can have quite a powerful outcome. So since we talked about a little about Zen calligraphy, I'll give you a quick overview of what Zen calligraphy is. Okay, so many Zen masters of the past have used this as a tool to revealing the Zen path. So it's used as a teaching tool, and also it can be interactive and dynamic. So it can, like I was saying, it move the viewer. So sometimes it can facilitate the person looking at the calligraphy to reach some sort of realization, and then that was accomplished by the master who was able to brush the calligraphy. So it is also a form of seated meditation or in an artistic form. So what is the same outcome that we can do as what we do called zazen or seated meditation, but we have this outcome in a more dynamic way. Okay. So as a viewer, we don't actually read Zen calligraphy, right? We try to absorb it with our senses. So we say we try to encounter the calligraphy instead of looking at it and be like, okay, what does that say? It's not so much of what does it say in terms of word, is what is telling you when you sit, when you take a moment and you look at that calligraphy, what is it that is doing to you by looking at it? So because of this goals, it tends to be bold, assertive, and most often it's done in an abstract way, or we call cursive style, because it's the style that leads to this aesthetic the best. Okay. Now, it's like I said, it effect can last centuries. These are pieces that you can look for centuries and thousands of years. We have great preservation of calligraphy from Asian masters, and then they still teaching the audiences today. So it's one of those things that you can have an imprint, and you can have an effect, and that effect lasts for many, many, many years, which is not true for older forms. So another thing about Zen calligraphy is the term for that is called bokuseki, okay, which means traces of ink. And like I said, it was used by many Zen masters as a teaching tool. Like Shodo, like Japanese calligraphy, has its roots in Asian Chinese calligraphy, especially from the Tang and Song dynasties. Shodo, or Japanese calligraphy, do use Chinese characters as its main component. What makes Japanese calligraphy unique from Chinese calligraphy, in many cases they use of kana, which is the native Japanese syllabary, and when that is incorporated into the calligraphy, is a little more unique. But in terms of using, we'll call kanji, which are Chinese characters. So it does have its roots in Chinese. And then usually follows the traditional cursive script, which is called Sosho. And a couple of figures who made this popular were Ikkyu Sojon, which was a famous Buddhist monk that lived from 1394 to 1481. He was the one who made Zen calligraphy, so to speak, popular in Japan. And also Hakuin Ekaku and Yamaoka Teshu were also two figures whose calligraphies are sought out as masterpieces. Okay, so what are the merits of practicing this? So we kind of know what this is. Why should we practice it? Okay, so because the practice of Japanese calligraphy demands patience, which sometimes we tend to have a little of a problem with, undivided attention, which also we have a lot of problem with, and full concentration. Therefore, it can become a great resource for releasing the stress, the pressures of daily life. Okay, so patience, undivided attention, and full concentration. Undivided attention means that that's all you can do, right? There's no multitasking in calligraphy. Okay, there's no multitasking or anything. That's a fallacy, but that's another topic. If you can only do one thing when you're doing calligraphy, you have a brush in hand, and then you have a paper in front of you, and then that's all you can do. Patience, because it takes a while to really learn how to do this. So in the beginning, it might be a little frustrating. I can get the line to look correct. It doesn't look right, but with more and more and more time doing it, we start to see something changing. Okay. It reveals our humanity through brushstrokes. Okay, and this is something that we take for granted. Sometimes, like I said, it can reveal that we're angry, it can reveal that we're sad, it can reveal that we're happy. Okay. Time and space are transcended when we do calligraphy. Expresses our personality. Okay, and eventually you can develop, so to speak, your own style after many years of training and learning the ropes and the basic. You kind of develop your own style, which is going to be based on your personality. It can touch the heart and clear the mind of those who experience it when done well. And it can also have the opposite effect, right? You can have a calligraphy that can make somebody uncomfortable. Be like, I don't know, I don't like having that. And, I don't like that one, right? You have that feel of like, I don't like that for some reason. So it has the meditative qualities because it's simple, okay? It's just black ink over white paper, right? So for the minimalists of the world, they love it, okay? Because there's nothing else involved, right? It's just black ink over white paper. Like I was saying, it demands fierce concentration. So you have to simultaneously pay attention to balance, composition, movement of the brush, pressure, the amount of ink that you have, the type of paper. I mean, there's just a lot going on, okay? In that one moment where the brush touches the paper, there's a lot happening, okay? So that fierce concentration is unparalleled. Like you cannot do it without it. Going back to the word samadhi, that intense focus is what we call samadhi, right? So it loses the distinction of you and the outside world when you are just completely, laser focused on your practice. What patience means, okay, it's relentless repetition. We have a word for that, which is called shugyo, which means repetitive actions, like daily practice or refinement, okay, is using this specific activity into endless repetition, okay, even though sometimes we feel like this is not going anywhere, but just that endless repetition, doing it over and over and over again, we start to see a breakthrough eventually through that, okay? Okay, so how do we integrate these two? How do we integrate this meditative concept with the activity? Okay, so I have a quote here from a Zen master in the Zen lineage that I trained, which says, in Zen art, technique cannot be entirely disregarded, nor is it possible to rely exclusively on inspiration. Okay, so speaking from like the Zen point of view, while you may have a very strong meditative practice, or you might even be an enlightened person, okay, you cannot disregard technique. At the end of the day, you still have to learn how to make a straight line, how to make a dot, and how to write a character properly, right? You cannot just completely rely on inspiration. It's just not going to work that way. And the other side of the coin, right, so lack of spiritual maturity can prevent the proper utilization of those techniques, okay? So that spiritual maturity cannot create beautiful art without formal training. So those things eventually has to come together to make that what we call masterpiece, okay? Is that we need to have some sort of spiritual maturity, but we also need to have technique, okay? So how do we can achieve this meditative calligraphy? The best way is to work with a teacher, someone who can show you the technique, someone who can show you how to do the strokes, about the tools, what is a good paper, what is a good brush, how to do the ink, and all that, all those basic things. And I can say from personal experience that being self-taught for most of my life, it's almost impossible to do it by yourself. It wasn't until like I had someone who was able to sit me down and be like, this is how it's done. Then it's just like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, like I wish I knew this 10 years ago. So working with a teacher is going to be crucial to be able to be on the right path, okay? Focus on breathing, and this is something that we're going to be doing tonight a little bit, okay? Focus on breathing, how to sink in your breath through your hand movement. You have to relax when you do this, so it's very common to hold our breath and tense our arms when we're trying to write, okay? And it shows on the lines that tense and rigidness. Going back to that word that I said earlier, right? Express kiai. So you have to express that spiritual spiritual power that we have in all of us, okay? And then make sure that that is imprinted in it. And sometimes that is imprinted from feelings, okay? So if we're mad, the calligraphy is going to look like it. If we're happy, the calligraphy is going to also show it. If we are tense, if we are worried, if we are to nervous, all those things will be imprinted in your lines. Learn the form, which we call kata, and that is a term that we use in many different arts. Okay, so learn the form, learn the basics, and also learn the styles from past masters. So looking at the calligraphy that are considered the masterpieces from even the from China, from the Tang Dynasty or the Song Dynasty, looking back to all those old masters and try to replicate their. We train by copying their pieces is a great way to learn. So build a solid foundation. Again, build a solid foundation on the basic techniques. Memorize the necessary elements of writing, and understand your tools. Okay, so as any form of art, we have some tools, and then we need to know how to use them. Okay, and we'll go over some of them tonight a little bit. Okay, so I got another quote for you, which means it says, this is by a famous calligrapher from the Meiji area, which says, "In training, calligraphy alone makes you a skilled craftsman," which is nothing wrong with that. Okay, being a craftsman, it's a venerable thing. I'm a cook by trade. That's my profession, and I feel like chefs are actually craftsmen. We learn how to replicate dishes and menus over and over again, not necessarily dishes that we created. Okay, so technical skill comes from training with a brush, while the heart of the work comes from training the mind. And then this is where we can bring this Zen meditation approach to it, so that we can have a well-written piece, but that's a heart. And then that's also the another thing that I have found is that you can look at some calligraphy that look beautiful, they look perfect, but they're dull, right? They seem like they could have done by like an AI, okay? Because they're just perfect. And I'm like, well, that's great, but it looks like a computer made it. Like there's not what's missing there. And then a lot of the times what's missing is the artist just having some heart into the piece or adding some heart to it. That can also be on the opposite way. You can have a piece of calligraphy that are like, wow, I mean, that calligraphy has a lot of energy, but it looks like crap because it's just badly written. Okay, has a lot of energy, and I appreciate your heart. I mean, and looks kind of good, but it's really badly written. So it's like how we can get those two to merge together. So I'm gonna just show this video because this is me demonstrating how to do this type of calligraphy in a longer paper, which is an angle that would have been hard for me to do on Zoom. So let me see if this will play. Okay, so that's what I have for slides. So what I want to do right now is switch my camera so that we can get going. Oops. There we go. Okay. So you should have received this exemplar, okay? And this exemplar is the word Seizan or Aoyama. There's two ways to pronounce it. But what it means is green mountain. Okay, this first character is green, the second character is mountain. And there's different meanings to this, but the meaning that I like to use is the word mountain sometimes it's used to refer to something that is strong and big and grander and has potential. Okay, it's just like it's something that has like a big solid foundation, right? We usually see mountains as majestics, right? And the word green mean well, the color green, but also when we use the color green, it's something that is young or like it's growing. Okay, like this idea of the spring and things that are coming to life and growing. So the word Seizan usually as a green mountain is just like something that has a lot of potential, something that is coming up and is growing. Okay, we're probably going to start with the second character. I feel it's a little simpler. We can start with that one first, and then we can go with the first one. But before we get into that, you should have one of these, okay, brushes. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you have a regular watercolor brush, it's fine. If it's not too big, that's okay too. But usually we use these ones, which I always keep forgetting. What's the length of the bristles? Okay, the length of the bristles is about 5 centimeters. Okay, that is a good length to start. It's big enough to do these bold lines, but it's not too small. And then we want to make sure that we at the beginning we want to create nice bold lines. Okay. Sumi ink, okay, from a bottle, it's totally fine. Okay. Oh, that's a little one. Yeah. If you don't have Sumi ink, you can use black watercolor ink. That's fine too. One thing about it will be the consistency of it, the viscosity of Sumi ink. It's kind of unique. You have to dilute or figure it out the watercolor, because watercolor tends to be a little bit watery, but acrylic tends to be too thick. So it's like, how do we get those? India ink would be a good one if you're using a non Chinese style brush, like this one's like a Chinese or Japanese style brush, and you're using a regular paintbrush. India ink would be a good substitution for Sumi ink. That will give you the viscosity, the depth of blackness that is similar to Sumi ink. Okay. Now for paper, we traditionally use this type of paper called hanshi, and hanshi actually is the size of the paper. It's what we look for. Sometimes we call it rice paper. That's how you would see it on stores. It's like rice paper, but that's a misnomer. Like, it's not really made out of rice. So it's usually made out of mulberry fibers and other tree fibers, not rice, but for some reason we call them rice paper. But in the when you look at it in Japanese stores, they will be called hanshi, and hanshi is the size, okay, which is not a standard size here in the West either. But you need some sort of felt or mat underneath we don't put the paper right on the table because it's not going to absorb the ink properly, and then the brush is not going to travel properly. So if you have something like a tablecloth or like a piece of felt or one of those things on the dining room table, escapes me right now, but a placemat or something like that, you try to use that instead of putting paper right on. If you don't have the Japanese paper or hanshi, you can certainly use copy paper, but copy paper is not going to absorb the ink as well, so it's going to take a long time to dry, and sometimes it might give you a little of a pool on the paper that might look runny. So the hanshi has that right absorbency for the paper. The best substitution, actually, and I'll get it real quick. I don't have it in front of me. Is newspapers. Okay, newspaper. So newspaper will actually absorb ink similar to the way hanshi does. So if you cannot find any hanshi or any type of so-called rice paper, you can get newspaper. Although newspapers are really hard to come by these days too. So I don't know which one are going to be easier to find. And they can be expensive too. But newsprint, you can go to art supply stores and get a sketchbook of newsprint, and then that will be something to get started too. Okay. So that's pretty much it to get started, right? The most important thing I would say is the brush and the ink. All right, so if we can get the brush and the ink, paper, to practice some lines. I mean, we're not going to make masterpieces, so you can practice lines and characters on newspaper, and then just recycle them, or make a fireplace with it, something with it. And then eventually you may want to like get on the hanshi if you're now trying to do something a little more finished. Okay. All right. So get your brushes inked up so that I'll do the first demonstration. So if you can just get your brushes inked up, get yourself ready. Also, I forgot to mention, you need something to hold the paper. So like a little paperweight that you can put to hold the paper steady. That would be great too. Stapler, something, a piece of rock, doesn't matter. A glass, something to hold the paper down. Okay, so we're gonna start composing the first the character for Yama. But before we do that, I want to show the two basic strokes first, okay? Which is gonna be the horizontal line and the vertical line, which is what this character is composed of. Let me just turn my camera a little bit. Okay. All right. So to do the horizontal line, I'm inking my brush. I want to make sure that my brush is not dripping. Okay. It's not dripping on the paper. So it should be well inked, but not like plop, 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 plop. You should hold your brush like this. It's perpendicular to the paper. But if I do that, this camera is going to be a hard time. You have a hard time seeing what I'm doing. So I do tilt it a little bit so that you can see. Okay, so when I write, you can see what I'm doing, but it should be straight up. Sometimes I catch myself. I'm like, I gotta tilt it. But that way you can see what I'm doing. All right. And so just start with. Oops. Speaking about having block on the paper. So I'm gonna start with the tip of the brush. Okay, I'm gonna set the tip of the brush at what we call 10 o'clock, or sorry, facing this direction. Okay, 10 o'clock. That's where the tip is gonna go. And then I'm gonna set the brush down. And then in one breath, one exhalation, I'm gonna draw diagonal. and stop. Okay. Now, one thing though, with the horizontal line, if I actually draw a straight line, it's not exactly straight, okay? So we have a little bit of space here, and that's important, okay? So we'll do it one more time. Okay, so as I go into the paper, I inhale, and then as I draw diagonally, I'm exhaling. Okay, so I keep my breath with it. So inhale, exhale, and stop. Okay. So one thing that I see on is to be careful to make sure the line underneath is nice and straight all the way through. It doesn't go like this. Okay. So it has, it has a solid bottom, right? It doesn't kind of bulb at the end. Okay, so that's the horizontal line. When we do the vertical line, it's similar, but now we go vertically. Okay, so demonstrate that. Okay, so same thing. Tip of the brush starts at 10 o'clock. Okay. Tip of the brush starts at 10 o'clock, and now I'm going to draw down. And then when we do a vertical line, we want it to be nice and strong. It's like a tree trunk, okay? It cannot be all wiggly. So one exhalation all the way. And also, we try to use our whole body. We don't try to just do it with the wrist, okay? We just kind of use our whole body and then draw that line nice and straight, okay? So start with the tip of the brush at 10 o'clock. And stop. Same thing. Okay. So, where's my pen? Up. So tip facing this way, okay? 10 and straight down, okay? So one more time. Okay. All right, try the vertical line. Yeah, vertical line. Don't forget to breathe, right? We talked about that. Don't hold your breath. Just nice long exhalation. So one thing that to this breathing to do the line, right? So if I have the brush, okay, and I inhale when I'm about to touch, so first, and you may see me a lot of times just before I brush, just kind of doing this, like I'm not quite ready, right? Just like, and this is what did you call it? Adjusting my breath first, okay? So once I'm like sort of kind of like empty, so to speak, then I take a deep breath, and then exhale, right? So a good exercise to do that, okay? Good exercise to do this is to just like pull back this way, okay? If you can do a standing or you can do a sitting, right? You take your hands like this, right? And then you just kind of inhale, like, and then nice long exhale. So my exhalation, especially if you're writing characters with multiple strokes, it's going to take a little longer. You got to have a nice long exhalation. We typically breathe opposite. We breathe long inhale, short exhale. Right? Long inhale, short exhale. We want to do it the opposite. We want to do quick inhale and then long exhale. Right? So we can practice that in, quick inhale, long exhale. We can sustain that line nice and slow, okay? All right, so how do we put this together to write Yama, or the character for mountain? So a couple of things that we need to keep in mind here is the stroke order, okay? The direction and the composition, all right? So we'll go through the stroke order first. What I would like you to do is grab your exemplar, piece of pen, with a pen, and as I do the stroke order, you write number. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, right? Just keep the numbers so that you know what order it goes. Okay. All right, so stroke number 1 is that vertical line that we just learned. Okay. So stroke number 1 is that vertical line. Stroke number 2 is vertical line, and it transitions to a horizontal line. I'm going to set this aside. I can go back to it, but I want to explain this real quick. So we have a short vertical line, okay, and we have the horizontal line, and we need to combine those two, and we do those in one stroke. Okay, so we go like this: 1 down, stop, change direction, 2. Okay, so you have to do it without lifting the brush. The tip of the brush stays. Okay, tip of the brush stays. I'm capturing the paper with the bristles, turn directions, and go to the horizontal line. Okay, so that would be stroke number 2. So let me go back to my other paper. Okay, all right, that's stroke number 1. Then stroke number 2. Okay. And stroke number 3. Okay. So stroke number 3. So stroke number 1, vertical line, nice and strong. Stroke number 2 is down, connect here, and then again, that vertical line is not, there's a space. Okay. And then stroke number 3 is another vertical line going in this direction. And then we have a mountain. Okay. And then another thing to pay attention to is the space between here. Okay. Space between those two spaces. All right, let's give it a shot. Each stroke is one breath. Okay, stroke number one breath. Stroke number two, one breath. Stroke number three, one breath. Pay attention to this too. Okay, the length of these. And then this vertical line goes inside here. Okay, so when so this is the vertical line, right? The horizontal line needs to cut through it. Okay. Okay, so work now on catching the paper here on this so that you can get this shape, which is the turning point, a little more pronounced. So when you come in, when you stop and you're turning, make sure that the bristles catch the paper and go. You understand what I mean? Okay. All right, yeah, should we try to do the first character? All right, let's go for it. Why not? It's mostly vertical lines and horizontal lines. Okay, if you look at it, horizontal line, vertical line. It's pretty much two lines. Now there's one difference here. There's a new stroke, which is the little hook here. Okay, that little hook going up. Other than that, it's pretty much horizontals and verticals. Okay. All right, so let's go through that. Okay, one thing that I like to do when we go to something a little more complex is we need to pay attention to our center line. Okay, every character has a center line where the compositions of the components of each character are based on that center line. So I'm going to mark my center line on the paper so that you can see how it balances on the center line. Okay, and I'll use these red dots so you can see them. But this is the center line, and everything's going to be balanced on it. How you can do this on your own it's because you don't want to be making red dots. Is to fold the paper. Okay, fold the paper, and then now you have center line going this way and center line going that way, and then that'll give you good measurement, so to speak. All right. Okay, so again, grab a pen and write the numbers as I go through them so that you know the stroke order. Okay, stroke number one is the horizontal line. Okay. Stroke number two is the vertical line. Stroke number three is the horizontal line in the middle. Stroke number four is the long horizontal line. My pen. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Five, vertical. 6 is a connecting stroke again. So we go horizontal, switch, vertical, and the hook. So this is 5, 6. So 6, it goes like this, then this, then this. Okay. And then 7, 8. All right, I'll do it one more time. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up. 7, 8. All right. Let's give it a shot. Based on this, how big you wrote this part, this part is too small. So make it a little bit longer so that it's balanced to how, because one thing that we need to pay attention is the spacing between the lines here. Okay, so the spacing between the lines here, right? So if that space is bigger, then that top part is gonna be much elongated, right? So then this has to match that. And then also the spacing between this line, we have to pay attention to. Okay, and then this is on the same level, right? And then the hook is going up back to 10 o'clock. Okay, so what time is this about? 11, well, it's my time. So we're about 15 minutes, and we like to save some time for some questions. But before we get into that, I also would like to show you some different writing styles. The one that we're doing tonight is what we call block script or kaisho, which is like basic, block script. Okay, is the most legible one. But when we talk about doing this more artistically, we usually like to use a semi-cursive or a cursive style. So using the same characters that we wrote, okay, the semi-cursive version of this called gyosho will be something like this. Then in this case, if I want to write both characters in the same piece of paper, I will fold it. So that way, okay, I know to say, character number 1, character number 2. Okay, that's it's a pretty good guideline. Okay. All right, so All right, so that would be semi-cursive. A little bit more cursive. This would be my preferred script. Okay. Yeah. All right, you guys have fun? Okay. Let's see. Let's see. I think yeah.
What's your tip for the consistency of ink? Because I found that mine was bleeding a great deal, whereas you have very nice, crisp strokes.
Are you talking about sumi ink?
I ground mine from stick today. So I've got
Oh, yeah. Well, I was gonna say the best way is to get a bottle. But wow, I mean, writing your ink, that takes a little bit of time to figure out how longer you have to grind it. So I'm not gonna discourage you from keep doing it, but I would still get a bottle and compare it until you get it to the same consistency as the bottle. And you might find that it takes a lot longer. When I done it, it's about 45 minutes of grinding.
I started grinding about an hour before we started because I got my time wrong. So yeah. I've been at it for a while this afternoon, but evidently more.
Yeah.
Okay, Patty-san.
Yeah, I had a question about speed. And I find when I go slow, really slow, like as slow as you were going, it was really difficult for me. But once I started speeding up, it was a little more, it looked better.
Interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes slowing it down brings a little more emphasis to details, especially on feeling the bristles on the paper. Okay, feel like that's something that it's important to get that sensitivity that you can feel the bristles. Obviously, I mean, I would say with a little more practice that can get ironed out, but the speed. So when you're writing block script, you want to be a little bit slow. When you're writing a little cursive, you can definitely speed up. And then that's some of the technique of cursive writing is that there's a tempo. I don't know if you noticed on the video demonstration that I posted on the slide, there is a tempo where the brush goes slow, fast, right? So we do use that eventually, but when you're learning how to just do lines and learn the stroke, yeah, we want to slow it down a little bit.
Slow it down. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody have any question?
I do have one. I wanted to ask about we wrote down the way each stroke is done in order. And for some reason, I felt like I wanted to do them in different order. Although there's a reason to do them in certain order, I'm sure.
The order is going to be critical for the character to look balanced. And then for the composition, and also the stroke order maintains the same direction when you go from one script to the other. So when you go from block script to semi-cursive to cursive, right? Like, it's not that you change the stroke order, it's that some stroke combines themselves. Like stroke 1 and 2 becomes, you can do it in one. You don't have to stop 1, 2, you can do it in one, but you still following that same order in that same path. And a lot of the times when the stroke order is not follow, you can kind of tell that the character looks a little off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.